headlines this hour. A US drone crashes in northwest Pakistan. The Taliban say they have the wreckage. More anti-US protests in Afghanistan. The US pulls its staff from Afghan ministries. Syria arrests 5 foreigners with French, British and US nationalities. It says they are spies. And Italy says it will suffer the most as oil prices surge over Iran's response to EU sanctions. Hello everyone and welcome to the news here on Press TV. Pakistani intelligence officials say a US assassination drone has crashed in North Waziristan in the northwest near the Afghan border. Taliban militants claim to have shot it down. They say they have collected the wreckage of the destroyed drone and would provide its pictures to the media. Authorities say an investigation is underway to find out the cause of the crash. Public anger has grown in Pakistan over attacks by US unmanned aircraft. Washington claims the airstrikes target militants crossing the Afghan border. However, on the ground, civilians have been the main victims. On Saturday, tribesmen and their political supporters staged a 2-day sit-in in Islamabad against the US drone strikes. The demonstrators arrived from North Waziristan region. Two senior American military officers have been shot dead inside the Interior Ministry in Kabul amid widespread anti-US protests across Afghanistan. The victims are believed to be a colonel and a major. The Taliban claim they've killed 4 Americans. They were reportedly killed by an Afghan police officer during a scuffle. NATO has pulled all its staffers out of Afghan ministries. The US has also pulled its advisors out of the defense ministry. 2 days ago, 2 American soldiers were killed by an Afghan soldier in Nangarhar. Anti-US sentiment has been high in Afghanistan over US forces' burning of the Holy Quran. Rallies have been held in the past 5 days. On Saturday, at least 6 protesters were killed, bringing the death toll to 34 since the protests began on Tuesday. Well, our correspondent in Kabul gives us more details about the shooting in the city.
Right after the shooting, we have been told by some Afghan officials inside the Afghan Interior Ministry who talked to us on the condition of anonymity, saying that it was 2 Afghan police officers who killed these 2 American advisors in retaliation for the desecration of the Holy Quran. But it was rejected soon by the spokesperson of the Afghan Interior Ministry, Mr. Sadiq Siddiqui. He said that no Afghan nationals are involved in this shooting. Now, the Taliban has posted a statement on their website claiming responsibility for this. They're saying that a man named Abdurrahman killed these 2 American advisors, again, because of the desecration of the Holy Quran. And the Taliban spokesperson is saying that this man named Abdurrahman, who killed these 2 American advisors, was held by an Afghan official who is still working in the Afghan Interior Ministry to get inside this ministry. Now, these claims are being investigated both by the Afghan government as well as by the US military men here in Kabul.
Well, Syria has reportedly arrested 5 foreign nationals suspected of involvement in espionage activities in the crisis-hit country. Press TV has learned that 3 Frenchmen, a Briton and an American, have been detained in Homs. The city has been the hotbed of violent clashes between army troops and armed gangs in recent months. Foreign agents are said to have infiltrated Syrian towns from areas in northern Lebanon controlled by Saudi-backed Salafists. Reports say the French ambassador to Syria has returned to the country to secure the release of the French suspects. Syrian authorities want to prosecute the foreign nationals for entering the country illegally. The Italian Prime Minister has acknowledged that the European Union's oil embargo against Iran will cause many problems for his country. Mario Monti says the move will hit Italy's energy supply more than other EU states as the country relies on foreign energy. He also added that the sanctions against Iran have been harmful for Italian and European firms. Italian media say Europe's oil embargo on Iran will also affect some 30,000 jobs across the country. They've also called the embargo useless as it would damage the Italian economy. Iran cut crude sales to French and British companies after the EU imposed unilateral oil sanctions against Tehran. Oil prices have increased remarkably as a result, hitting their highest levels in 9 months. Meanwhile, high-ranking oil officials say Iran's petrochemical industry benefits from high oil prices. They've also talked of Iran's strategy to counter the unilateral sanctions targeting Iran's petrochemical industry. Press TV's Arash Khalatbari tells us more.
Iran's second biggest petrochemical producer in the Middle East. Iran's national petrochemical manager explains why Iranian petrochemical products are of high quality yet have lower prices in the international markets.
A good advantage that Iran has is that it produces its petrochemical products using gas. European countries mostly use crude oil, liquids, or liquid gas to produce petrochemical products, and this is why Iranian products can easily compete. For example, when ethylene is produced using gas, its price becomes half or one-third lower.
He also talked about where Iran is selling its petrochemical products as compared to the past.
A large part of our export was to Europe in the past, and now we mostly export to Asia and Latin America. This does not mean that we have cut our exports to Europe. We are selling to Europe.
Experts believe that high demand for Iranian petrochemical products makes it difficult for the buyers to turn down the lucrative business in Iran just because of unilateral sanctions put in place by the West.
I think
that what is important in the world energy market is its economic side and not its politics. Iran's petrochemical products have a higher added value since gas is used instead of liquid in the process of making it. And as for quality, I can say that our products can easily compete in the international markets. And since Iranian products are of high quality and are more cost-effective, sanctions will lose their effect.
Officials say that Iran has exported around $11 to $12 billion of petrochemical products in the past 11 months, and that this figure can become around $14 billion by the end of the next month. Iranian oil officials say that with crude oil prices going up in the world market, prices for Iran's petrochemical products will also increase, and it will make up any losses having to do with sanctions put in place by the West that target Iran's petrochemical industry. Arash Khalatbari, Press TV, Tehran.
Well, continued Israeli brutality against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank has claimed the life of another young man. Israeli forces fired tear gas at mourners returning from the man's funeral, injuring at least 9.
Israeli forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd of mourners returning from the funeral of the 23-year-old Palestinian man killed by Israeli forces near the Qalandiya checkpoint on Friday. Medics say Tal Adramia bled to death as he had sustained a serious bullet wound to his chest. The Palestinian Authority has condemned Ramia's brutal killing and has held Israel solely responsible for the crime. It has also criticized the international community's silence that has led to an escalation of Israeli violence against Palestinians. Israel says it will investigate the shooting, but Palestinians say such investigations rarely lead to indictments against guilty Israeli soldiers. The clashes near the Qalandiya checkpoint erupted after Israeli police clashed with Palestinians at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem, Al-Quds. Four Palestinians were injured and nearly a dozen others were detained by Israeli forces. Confrontations between Israeli forces and Palestinians have been ongoing since last week. Dozens of Israelis entered the Muslims' third holiest site, the Al-Haram al-Sharif, and scuffled with Palestinian worshippers on Sunday. Israel's human rights violations and its breach of international law in the occupied territories frequently lead to violent confrontations. The clashes have claimed many Palestinian lives and resulted in the illegal detention of thousands of others.
You're watching Press TV News. A look at the headlines this hour. A US drone crashes in northwest Pakistan. The Taliban say they have the wreckage. More anti-US protests in Afghanistan. The US pulls its staff from Afghan ministries. Syria arrests 5 foreigners with French, British and US nationalities. It says they are spies. And Italy says it will suffer the most as oil prices surge over Iran's response to EU sanctions. And still to come here on Press TV, we'll tell you more about anti-ACTA protests across Europe. Stay tuned. Now, in the US, 12 students at the University of Virginia are still on a hunger strike after 8 days. They protest the economic and social injustices by the UVA administration against its service sector employees. Hundreds of the university's contract employees reportedly make less than $7.25, which is not enough to pay for their basic necessities in Charlottesville. The employees, mostly African Americans and women, are struggling with life where the cost of living is nearly 10% higher than the national average. This extreme inequality has disturbed and disillusioned the students who, despite their pleas, have been consistently ignored by authorities. Now, activists have been meeting in London to discuss the rise of the far right in Europe and ways of opposing the English Defence League. Well, Unite Against Fascism, the group organising the conference, says a majority of Britons oppose discrimination and hatred, but that politicians are using the issue as a distraction from the country's economic crisis. Press TV's Hassan Ghani tells us more.
The English Defence League. Its members say it's fighting to protect the UK from so-called Muslim extremism and is promoting English culture and traditions. Over the last few years, we've reported on the growth of this street movement, and more often than not, its marches have ended in chaos and violence. Most Muslims in the UK believe the group is out to incite hatred against them. And as the EDL and right-wing sentiment in the UK have grown, so too has opposition to them. Unite Against Fascism is a group which has taken on the English Defence League on a street level. Wherever the EDL turn up, the UAF are there with a counter-protest. Its critics say it's stifling freedom of speech, but it says it's protecting the rights of minorities and represents the views of the majority.
When people say, I would like to organise a pogrom, and then put, oh, well, we'll call it a march, yeah? We say, we know where this leads. It doesn't just stop there. It goes on, and it leads to a situation where life becomes untenable for everybody.
And the activists accuse European governments and some quarters of the media of feeding into an atmosphere which has fostered the rise of the far right.
Politicians are using this, or using racism to cynically deflect away, to deflect attention away from their failure to deal with the economic crisis. So you look at Sarkozy banning the veil. He should be dealing with, unemployment, low pay, the serious